Welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Anwar Youssef Dunbar, and this is Big Discussions 76. And due to the nature of my guest, as you can see, I have a guest tonight. This might be actually a simulcast where I'll put this up on my original channel and my science and technology channel as well, because I think it kind of goes in both directions. But I am here with a guest, Dr. Thomas Strain. How you doing, Dr. Strain?
Anwar, or Dr. Dunbar, I'm also doing very well.
Okay, all right. And you know, what's funny is actually, in a way, you are a return guest because we tried to do this about a month and a half ago, and I really wanted to do this one for Black History Month, but the technology, we couldn't get a good connection for whatever reason, and I had to get a Zoom was telling me that I had an unstable connection, and we tried Skype, and that wasn't a nice stable connection as well. And when I looked at the playback, it wasn't high quality. And so my brother Amal, your cousin, I like to call him my media and visual effects consultant, because that's his background. And he looked at the file as well, and he said, yeah, there's not a lot you can do with this. So before this whole pandemic broke out, we had a family trip planned to go to Louisiana for my mother's birthday. And so in my mind, I was thinking, okay, well, maybe I can go before the trip or after the trip and take my video camera, and me and Tommy can do this in person. But then this whole thing broke out, and travel was restricted, and so here we are. I have a new wireless router and a new modem, and everything seems to be fine. I haven't gotten any notification that I have an unstable connection. So I really appreciate you coming back this second time for our take two.
Oh no, it's been a pleasure. And as you may say later on, but I'm going to preempt you, this is something that we've been talking about for at least 6 to 9 months about occurring, and me being on your blog and dealing with your STEM program based upon me being one, a family member, and two, the profession that I'm in.
Okay. Yeah. So, we'll start with that. And so you're actually the third doctor I've interviewed. I've interviewed two in print. I interviewed Dr. Quinn Capers, who's, I believe, is the Dean of Cardiology at The Ohio State University. I'm a Michigan alum, so you see my flag back there. But I met him on actually Twitter, and then I interviewed Dr. Cedric Bright, who I believe is the Associate Dean of Admissions at East Carolina University. And I met him through a contact. And so my cousin, your sister, said, you should interview Thomas. She calls you Thomas. And I want to say that, with me interviewing those two gentlemen, I was not overlooking you in any way. And I know that I'd known for my entire life that you were a medical doctor, but it just, the way things, life unfolds, I was just looking for stuff to write, and I met those two guys. I just happened to do them first. I just want to tell you that in doing them first, I wasn't, I wasn't consciously looking to pass over you in any way.
First of all, no apologies necessary. Because as you may get to know me even more throughout life, I never feel slighted, especially when there's a project going on, which is to help humanity. And if I get to be number 4, number 1, number 100,001, to do something that may contribute to someone else's knowledge, enthusiasm, make them feel that their passion is there for them to move forward, so be it. But I thank you.
All right. Thank you. I think this is going to really benefit a lot of people. So with that, Tommy, let's jump in. So describe, so you're a physician now, a medical doctor, and later on I'm going to ask you what your specialty is. But for now, let's go back to the start. Where, talk a little bit about where you're from, and please describe your educational path.
Okay. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and then around 10 years of age, based upon our ancestor, Lillian Van Allen Martin, because your great aunt Margaret Strain had 3 kids, whereas your grandmother only had your father. She left the residence to Margaret Strain, okay, my mother, because of the number of kids. That's what I was told. Not trying to slight anybody, okay. So I moved from New York, Brooklyn, out to like 85 miles out to Eastern Long Island, which is now called the Hamptons of Long Island. We lived in a little hamlet of Quail, which is associated with West Hampton Beach. I went to high school there, and I went from actually 5th grade on in that town. And while I was there, I was trying to move forward, and based upon the congregation that my parents and Aunt Lil and Uncle Charlie started, they were always pushing college and education. And what was so nice about that was that along with them doing that, even though we were a minority in the town, at a predominantly Caucasian town because of a resort town, the high school teachers were also pushing for people to go on to college. And with that said, the next thing that happened is my mother talked to the guidance counselors because they were trying to track me to go into vocational versus a Regents diploma. They wanted me to do more or less a local vocational diploma. And Aunt Margaret went to the counselor and said, my son really wants to go to college and he understands he needs his Regents diploma. Give him a chance. So with that, I worked very hard knowing I had the backing of my parents, and then learned out that I had the backing of the community, the congregation, the teachers, my friends who were not of color. Their parents were also backing me to do the best I could. And then some of them ended up, like even the people that was cleaning their house and doing the yards and babysitting, the Davises, who now are Davis, Delaney, and Harrow, they wrote a letter of recommendation for me to go to college. My 5th grade friend's father, who was in real estate, Mr. Turchinian, he wrote a letter of recommendation for me to go to college, along with the guidance teachers and the teachers. And so I had like 3 to 4 colleges that I wanted to go to, and I got accepted to almost most of the ones that I applied to. But what happened is my father had his 6th heart attack and first stroke at age 67 when he was still working, the month before I was supposed to graduate from high school. And that changed the possibility of going to whatever college I wanted to, no matter what expenses were. And so what happened is my guidance teachers talked to Marist College that was having a HEOP program upward bound to see that even though I was a B+ student, not a C student, had good grades, whether I could get into that program. And that's how I ended up going to Marist College. I had to do a summer program. And then after doing this, with the summer program, I did very well. And while in college, the teachers, science teachers and everything else saw some sort of potential in me and said, what do you want to do? I said, well, you know what? I want to teach. And they said, well, why don't you go into medicine? And I thought about it while I wanted to become a biology teacher because some of the people that wrote my letter of recommendation were my science teachers in high school, Mr. Griffin, Mr. Davis, and they were like inspiring for me to be a good, caring teacher. And then my college chemistry teacher, biology teachers were like, yeah, you can make it. You can go to college. You can go on to medical school. And so I started taking courses for that while also taking courses to get a teacher's certificate in education. When I graduated, I decided that I would work on my master's in education while seeing if I got accepted into medical school after taking the MCATs. I applied to Baylor, Howard, New York Medical College, UC Davis, or University of Southern California, LA. And there was one other one I applied to while working as an orderly, taking care of some of the elder people in the rich elder people in the Hamptons of Long Island and doing interviews. I could only do local interviews, so the only ones that I ended up doing, I think, University of New York at Albany was one of them too. So I remember interviewing there, interviewed at New York Medical College, did not get accepted for it. No, I did an interview at Howard, but it was a pre-interview. The other ones in California and Baylor in Texas sent me an invitation for an interview, but based upon finance, I could not go. So I never went for those interviews. With that being said, when I interviewed at New York Medical College, it turned out that who became my medical advisor, my counselor during medical school, he interviewed me, and unbeknownst to me, until at the end of the interview, he had a summer home in the Hamptons, in West Hampton. And the next thing I knew, I was accepted at New York Medical College, and the rest is basically history. It was interesting being in medical school because I had my challenges. My father was still in and out of going to the hospital. I did have Anthony Clemendor, who was the dean of minority for New York Medical College. He was supposedly my medical advisor, but at the same time period, he made a statement that made me hold my tongue because I didn't do well on one of the tests. And in retrospect of all these years, it might have been reflected upon him. And he basically made something which I think the majority of minorities would agree. You do not tell someone, I don't care if you're from the Caribbean, which he was, or anything like that, that for you to get where you want to be, you have to divorce yourself from your family. And when he said that, it was like, as I said, I held my tongue because there were certain profanity words that I wanted to tell this well-dressed Afro-American Trinidadian dean, that where, including some of those words as to where he can take his words and shove it. And then luckily at that time, the person who interviewed me who was in New York but had the summer home in West Hampton, he was keeping tabs on me. And he happened to call, maybe by the grace of Hashem, I don't know what it was, but and I told him what had happened, and he told me, I'm your medical advisor from now on, don't even worry about it. And him and his wife took me underneath their wings, and to this day, he's 94, going on 95, and she's in her 80s. We keep a good communication because of all that they did to help me through medical school, emotionally, psychologically, and even financially. They even did some other stuff for my mother, and they also helped your cousin Paulette when she got out of school. By offering her to live at their house in Manhattan rent-free while she was finding jobs and stuff. But then from there, I left medical school and applied for my residency program in family practice and got accepted at John F. Kennedy Medical Center in Edison, New Jersey. Did my 3 years residency program, finished that, and then because I had a government obligation for some of the financial needs that I had going on, I did my 2-year obligation that was necessary with Uncle Sam, but I did it through as a commissioned corps officer with Indian Health Service, left them, and then went on to different aspects of medicine, medical practices with different groups.
Okay. Well, Tommy, before we go on, I want to say that I want to give a little more background here to the audience. So I guess, yeah, so my father would be your first cousin.
Correct.
Right. So that means me and my brother are your second cousins, and we're all Van Allens. But are you the only medical doctor in the Van Allen clan and the Strain clan?
To my knowledge, I am. I was also told, they kept saying I was the first one to go to college. I was the first one to go to college out of the Strain clan. Your father was the first one to go to college out of that.
Van Allen?
Van Allen's. No, I take that back because we had Donald Van Allen, who I think he went to college. He was like a second cousin to your grandmother and my mother, okay, through the Van Allen clan. So, yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, so your mother and my grandmother were sisters.
Correct.
So, what's interesting is that, speaking of my grandmother, I write a blog post for Mother's Day every year since I started my blogging platform. And I wrote something about both of my grandmothers about 2 years ago. And one of the things I wrote about my grandmother, your Aunt Evelyn, is that as a result of, as an unintended consequence of my parents splitting up, we didn't get to spend as much time with my grandmother, your Aunt Evelyn, and me and my brother talk about this as well. We didn't get to spend as much time with you all. So, so long story short, my father, your cousin, wanted me to become his lawyer, and he wanted my brother to become his medical doctor. So he had careers planned out for us. But, when we look back at that, having, being able to spend some more time with you and Paulette and, Henry, some of that probably would have rubbed off on us. And, it's an exposure thing. I think that exposure is very, very important. I mean, certainly there are examples of kids who have gone on to medical school or law school without having those individuals in their family, or even having those individuals in their family and not being able to interact with them. But when me and my brother talk about that, we think that would have made a big difference in our lives.
Right. And, as I implied, inferred, the community was very supportive. You know how they say it takes a tribe to raise a child?
Yes.
And we were lucky that in the congregation, Amy Zion, St. Paul's Amy Zion in Qual, there was Dr. I forgot her name. I'm sorry, Dr. Price. Dr. Price happened to be a PhD virologist who worked at the national lab. And so, you know, as I said, she was in our congregation. There were other people who did not have a college education, but they knew the importance of, number one, finishing high school, and number two, getting a good education, college, undergrad, I mean, if it's associate's degree, whatever it was, to move forward. And with them, when you see the community praise those people who are maybe 4 or 5 years older than you about, oh my God, they got accepted into college. Oh, they're going to college. You're like, okay, this is the right thing to do. You know, I want to go to college, and these people got accepted, and the community is behind them. You know, raising little fund money to help them is to maybe pay for a book, buy a suitcase, have money to get them to where they needed to go, because a lot of times some of us did not have cars in our community. So we had to take mass transit to get to the college campus where we were going to be in the dorm and stay. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So moving on. So before I jump into this question, I wanted to say that, you know, we're from the opposite end of the state. Me and my brother were from Buffalo. And so you grew up in Long Island. And I just want to say that every time I go, that seems like it would have been such a fun place to grow up, because you're right there on the ocean, and it's so woodsy. And it seems like it would have been a fun place to grow up in, and even to live in today. So being from Buffalo, being from Buffalo, I came of age when Buffalo was kind of in its trough, you know, kind of in its trough. And so going to an HBCU was a big deal for some of us Black kids in Buffalo. And I did end up going to one. And I remember there was a discussion that me and you had when I was thinking about making that transition from a PWI, because I went to Brockport for 1 year. And you told me something that really, really stayed with me, which was that you told me when you were pondering going for your undergraduate education, that you felt like you didn't need the Black college experience. And you know, what I learned was that there are pluses and minuses to going to both. And you know, going to an HBCU isn't necessarily a bed of roses. I might get myself in trouble for saying that, but I think what you said was important, because it was saying that not all of us African Americans or descendants of Africa, you know, we don't all grow up the same, and we don't all need the same things. I don't know if I'm saying that in the best way, but what's your outlook on you conveying that to me at the time?
In retrospect, thinking back, you have to realize that having been raised in an area where, let's say, my graduating class consisted of approximately kids from what I call about 6 communities: West Hampton Beach, Cork, East Cork, Remsenburg-Spion combination in the Air Force Base. I graduated a class that might have been like 105. There were only maybe 12 to 15 people of color in my graduating class.
Mm-hmm.
So I was not actually raised in a predominantly Afro-American community, even though I would go into New York City, visit your aunt, your dad, visit our family members in New York City. It was fun. And I will always remember being on Marist College, we had what they call the Benoit House. That's where all the kids of Afro-American sort of stayed. Besides in certain dorms, they would congregate and be together. And so it was like they were from New York City. They
Mm-hmm.
were from Albany. They were from an inner city sort of situation, whereas I was raised in a rural suburban area. And I think, you know, I, I, I recall during my college years when there was Black Power, Revolution, and all sorts of stuff. I'm like, who's Malcolm X? Okay, I knew who Martin Luther King was, but who's this person? Who's that person? They knew it. In fact, I was called an Oreo because it was like, okay, you're this now. And I'm saying, no, you have to realize I was not raised with this. Yes, I had brothers and sisters that were older, that were still living in New York City. I was still enjoying going into New York City, partying in New York City, um, learning a little bit about my culture, whatever my parents and my immediate relatives would let me know about. But for me to be totally in that community all the time really would have been, I think, to me, more uncomfortable. But I know other people who were raised in an inner city situation
Mm-hmm.
might have felt, and they did on Marist College, felt out of their element. Okay. Um, so that might have been the reason why I said it all, it all depends upon where you're coming from. You know, for me, I could not see myself in that. Secondly, I did not really know about these Howard being considered a historical Black college. I did not know about Grambling. I did not know about Prairie View, etc. I did not. They were not in my vocabulary of knowing. In fact, your cousin-in-law George Mickey,
Mm-hmm.
his uncle went to Lincoln.
Mm.
I didn't know about Lincoln until he ended up going to Lincoln in Pennsylvania. And I was like, okay. And he had to make a slight adjustment too. Okay. But seeing that his uncle was from there and they most likely talked about it in his family arena, I had no knowledge per se.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Okay.
was the reason. It's more or less, where are your comfort zone? What have you heard? What do you know? What do you think you'll fit best into?
Yeah.
Even when I was in Marist College, I would go over to New Paltz and hang out with the African American group. Go to Vassar College, hang out with the African American group. But as far as constantly living in that overall, and I'm just going to add this. As I have grown and met other professionals of African American education or educators, they have let me know of what they felt was the importance of the historical Black college-universities. Those being, one, enforcing your identity. Two, helping you, because some of us do not have the educational skills and tools that some of the historical Black colleges make sure that you have as in your first maybe semester or two, the rudimentary stuff, so that you can really excel.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so learning all that, I mean, knowing that, I've given my kids the option of going wherever they want to go, letting them know that it's out there, and have also said to them, you have to realize, as I say to all kids, it doesn't matter where you go, you have to make the most out of what you've been given
Mm-hmm.
to achieve what you want to get.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, a quick funny story about Lincoln. The story is allegedly my father, your cousin, wanted to go to Lincoln, but my grandfather told him he couldn't go to an HBCU because they do too much partying. Um,